So Anthropic just released Claude Opus 4.8, and let's talk about it. So the headline feature that Anthropic keeps emphasizing is honesty. Specifically, they claim that Opus 4.8 is better at identifying uncertainty and admitting when it doesn't know something. And it's also better at warning users when its own output is flawed. Anthropic says that Opus 4.8 is roughly 4 times less likely than Opus 4.7 to generate flawed code and then fail to mention the flaw. So with the new release of the Opus 4.8 model, Claude is essentially becoming a better collaborator. And essentially what this means is that Claude is just going to be more willing to tell you when your assumptions are wrong or when your task isn't actually being completed. And that sounds small until you have spent hours debugging code generated by a model that confidently lied to you. And what's interesting is that many early users aren't talking about benchmark scores at all, they're talking about the behavior. Several users have reported that Opus 4.8 catches its own mistakes more often and is less likely to pretend it completed work that it never actually completed. And that's exactly the kind of improvement that benchmarks often miss. And I think one of the funnier reactions to this launch is that some users actually don't really like the honesty improvements. There's already threads of people talking about how Claude feels more argumentative or more cautious or just less willing to simply go along with what you're saying. The skeptical view from Hacker News is that Anthropic may be over-marketing normal model improvements as some grand breakthrough in honesty. And that's fair criticism. But even the skeptics agree that reducing hallucinations and false confidence is one of the most valuable directions model development can actually take. One of the biggest product changes is effort control, and users can now explicitly tell Claude how much reasoning effort to spend on a task. Anthropic now exposes multiple effort levels. High is the default, and extra and max push the model to spend more compute and more tokens before answering. In Claude code, extra appears as X high. And this matters because not every task deserves maximum reasoning, of course, and for example, rewriting an email and debugging a production code base shouldn't consume the same amount of compute. The main community response seems to be that people want benchmark results for every effort level. For example, they want to know whether max effort gives a 2% improvement or a 20% improvement. And until we get more independent testing, that's still sort of an open-ended question. Anthropic also launched fast mode, and according to the company, it can deliver up to 2.5 times higher output token speed while still using Opus 4.8. However, the main catch is with pricing because standard Opus remains at $5 per million input tokens and $25 per million output tokens, while fast mode actually doubles that to $10 for input and $50 for output. So you're paying for latency and not really intelligence. The good news is that Anthropic didn't raise the base price of Opus itself, and that's nice because model pricing has generally trended upward in recent times. And developers on Hacker News immediately focused on cost, and that's because once you're deploying agents at scale, token economics matter just as much as benchmark costs. If you're a developer, this is probably the feature you should care about most. Dynamic workflows allows Claude Code to break down large tasks into smaller tasks, spawn parallel subagents, verify results, and combine everything into a final answer. Anthropic specifically highlights security audits, bug hunts, optimization reviews, framework migrations, and large-scale code-based analysis. And these are tasks where one agent often misses things simply because the scope is too large. Anthropic says that dynamic workflows generated roughly 750,000 lines of Rust code, achieved roughly 99.8% test pass rates, and it completed migration in 11 days. And whether you view that as impressive or terrifying, it's one of the strongest public examples we've seen of large-scale agentic coding. However, the downside is with cost because Anthropic explicitly warns that dynamic workflows can consume substantially more tokens than normal Claude code sessions. More agents means more reasoning, and more reasoning means more money, unfortunately. Anthropic says that Opus 4.8 performs better on long horizon coding tasks, triggers tools more reliably, and handles context compression much better. The model also supports a 1 million token context window and up to 128,000 output tokens, and that's enough to fit entire code bases, large legal document collections, or extensive agent histories into a single session. AWS positions Opus 4.8 as Anthropic's strongest generally available model for coding and enterprise agents, and that's important because many companies won't use Claude AI directly, and they'll access it through Bedrock or Vertex. And I think that one underrated addition is mid-conversation system messages, so developers can now update instructions during long-running workflows without rebuilding the entire prompt stack. Now, let's talk about the benchmarks. Anthropic's charts shows gains across coding and reasoning and agentic tasks, and there were actually some external tester quotes For example, Cursor reported that it had much more reliable tool usage, browser agent testing reportedly reached 84% on online Mind to web, and legal benchmark testers claimed that Claude Opus 4.7 achieved their highest recorded score. Velim's analysis reaches a similar conclusion. This isn't really a giant leap in raw intelligence, it's more so a collection of improvements that makes the model more dependable in real workflows. That's why Simon Wilson's description keeps coming up. He claims that it is modest but tangible. So not revolutionary, but meaningful if you're already using Claude every single day. The bigger story may actually be what comes next. Routers report that Anthropic is preparing broader Mythos releases with additional safeguards. Anthropic also claims that Opus 4.8 shows substantially lower rates of misaligned behavior than Opus 4.7 and performs similarly to Mythos Preview on some of the alignment measurements. But you guys should test this model out for yourself, and I'm curious what you guys think, so make sure you guys let me know in the comments below. If you want to stay up to date with all things AI, that's the name of the channel. Make sure that you guys subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.